Hello and welcome back to our channel, Tree of Knowledge, Good and Evil. I'm Noah Goodman and I'd like to talk to you about another subject today, the subject of quality versus quantity. It's a very old question and it's a kind of endless question. We're not really going to finish it in one episode, however, this one episode can be referenced in the future and will actually give you the basis for the question. The answer, I'm going to spoil it right up front, is it's going to be a matter of how much of a qualitative difference do we have. That means how much better are my troops than your troops. And quantitative difference. That means I outnumber you, but by how much do I outnumber you? That is to say that there's always going to be a qualitative difference and a quantitative difference, sometimes big differences and sometimes small differences, and the size of the difference really matters. Think for a moment if we placed 5,000 modern infantry to face 50,000 Romans. You know, the classical ones you always see in the movies. The ones that have two spears to throw, a tiny little sword, and a huge shield. Who would win? Obviously, the modern infantry would slaughter the Romans. The 10-to-1 advantage would not be enough to stop the quantitative advantage. The machine guns, the mortars, they would just rout the Romans easily. On the other hand, if we took 50,000 World War II troops and had them face 10,000 modern infantry, we're not quite sure who would win. On the one hand, the World War II veterans, the troops, would outnumber the modern infantry 5-to-1. On the other hand, the modern infantry would have better rifles, better tactics. How much each advantage helps, we're not quite sure. However, we do have a distinct advantage here and a distinct advantage there. Now, the reason that this question is always endless is that we're always going to be questioning kind of situations that are kind of borderline here and borderline there. There's always a question of how much, there's different types of situations, and in most cases in history, it's not an overwhelming advantage one way or the other. That means that rarely do we have a situation where we have a super advanced nation fighting a super backwards nation, or that an army that's 10 times bigger fighting an army that's 10 times smaller. Usually, they either side with bigger powers that back them up, they buy technologies from foreign nations, they form confederations, and the advantage is usually more borderline and less distinct, like in the situation we mentioned before. However, in reality, this is 2/3 of the question. There is another third of the question, and that is timing, something that movies often get wrong. Usually, it's significantly harder to fight 10 enemies at once than it is to face them one by one. That's why in many different action films with Jackie Chan and Chuck Norris and all the rest of them, the enemies come at them one at a time. This way they defeat 50 enemies in a long drawn out battle scene. However, they defeat the enemies one by one. On the other hand, a movie that did this very well was Lord of the Rings, the second one. The three stars there, or three of the stars there, were walking in the middle of a field. There's an elf, a dwarf, and a human, and suddenly a bunch of cavalry surround them. They immediately take a circular position around them. That is to say, each of them are standing in the circle and facing the three stars. They're not looking at random directions. They all have their spears pointed directly at our three stars. During this scene, they have a kind of discussion. At some point, they start being rude to each other. The elf immediately takes out his bow and aims it at their leader. The response of the cavalrymen, they all just point their spears closer to them. If he tries to shoot their leader, if they try any kind of attack on the cavalry, the cavalry are immediately going to stab them from all directions. When you're talking about 50 spears against three heroes, well, you're outnumbered and you can't really do anything. You might get one or two down, however, within seconds you're dead. And if you didn't manage to kill anyone within those seconds, well, maybe the death rate is going to be 3 against 0. In any kind of battle, we're going to see that the side that has a much larger army and the numerical advantage is going to try to use it. That means that we want to attack in multiple locations and test out the enemy. We want to stretch the enemy thin and defeat them everywhere, or let them make a stand and lose a bunch of positions that they can't hold all at once. If we are, however, a qualitative army, we're going to want to make sure that the fighting is done in a very limited location so that they can't use the quantitative advantage against you. You want to be facing very, very small amounts of troops at once. For example, narrow passageways and fortified locations. You want the enemy to just lose your troops one at a time rather than surround you and attack you from each direction. Jumping back to our political discussion, today, because of the declining birth rates, we see more and more advanced countries like the West, Eastern Europe, and Asia investing in quality troops because they do not want to send the few sons they have into war. They don't have enough population and they don't want to lose it. Instead, they want to invest in tanks, airplanes, advanced weaponry, and they also want to hire foreign mercenaries from the third world to replace the troops they don't want to deploy. This means that they're going towards the qualitative armies to face what may be a quantitative enemy in the future. In another one of our games, we have found something very interesting. Here we have samurai spearmen, and on the other side we have peasant spearmen. We notice something very interesting, and it's very, very comfortable to look at it this way. It turned out that the samurais cost twice as much to recruit, they cost twice as much to upkeep, and it took twice as long to maintain them. So after a certain amount of time, with the same investment, you could have twice as many peasants as you could have samurai. So then the question became, what is better? Should we have a low quality army that is expansive and has a lot of units, or a high quality army? In this specific case, it turned out that a high quantity army wins the fight. So we're just going to have it play out. What we do is we send one unit in up the front. The other unit is going to engage from the back. It's going to maneuver around and you're going to see it attack from the back. Of course, time is of the essence, so we're not going to have them walking slowly. We're going to have them enter battle position and attack from the back. As you can see, the front is kind of collapsing. We see already 30% lost on our side. 60 out of 200 of the men on the front. They, however, have lost less units. However, they're out of a much smaller unit, and now they are being engaged from the back. Now what we have is a situation where they cannot fight on two fronts at once, and while I may lose more troops, I am going to win because every one of their troops just is a lot more valuable. Now what we have here is a rout after they lost about 120, 130 of their men, and only a small fragment of what they have left is still there. So, in this case, because we overloaded the enemy and attacked from multiple directions, we actually won the battle with low quality troops. Had we sent them up front from one side to attack, we would have lost. The first unit would have routed, and the second one may have won or may have not, but either way we would have gotten less good results. We would have lost more men and possibly lost the battle. However, the issue becomes a bit more complicated when we talk about locality. Troops that are too far away from the battle can't help the battle. That means that the local numerical advantage is very, very important. Imagine, if you will, we have 100,000 troops. 60,000 are to the north, facing our enemies there. 40,000 are in the south, facing our enemies there. Perhaps we don't know if they're going to attack, we have them there just in case. Let's say the enemy to the south attacks us with 20,000 troops. Now our southern 40,000 troops are engaged, so we have a 2-to-1 local numerical advantage, not a 5-to-1 advantage, because 60,000 troops are not in the game. They're not defending us from the southern enemy, they're up north. So we have a 2-to-1 numerical advantage. How is this used on the battlefield? Commanding officers need to remember that units that are pinned down can't help their neighboring units. That means if you attack and pin down a bunch of their units, and then you find that one of them is the weak spot, you mobilize your reserves to attack that weak spot. You break through and you hit critical units in the back, the ones that have a lot of strategic value. Maybe airports that are too close to the front, maybe munition lockers that would help them a lot, fuel tanks like gas storing locations, vehicle repair centers, barracks, anything that is not protected well that you can hit could be vital to the enemy side. And what you're doing here is you are overloading a very, very specific part of the front, and you want it to break, because even if the other places don't break, you may, through the one location that breaks, hit critical bases in the back. The kind of bases that without them, the enemy will just collapse in the long term. For this exact purpose, cavalry have been used in the past, to use as shock tactics and to chase down the enemy. For this reason, today we use tanks and attack vehicles, so that we can concentrate our forces in one location, have a large numerical advantage in that location, break the enemy, chase them down, and win, and turn a tactical victory into a strategic victory. In defense, we want to reinforce any place in the line that is breaking, because if the enemy has any kind of advantage at any locality, we want to reinforce them numerically to make them stronger. Where in our line is the weak point? Sometimes we cannot foresee that in advance. Sometimes we just place more troops there. Either way, we want to mobilize troops to strengthen the weak spot. One personal tactic that I want to display is one that has a bunch of units. However, because this is a bit more complex, I decided not to bring you a video from the game, but rather describe it with a picture. I don't want to make it too complex with too many units and a bunch of things going on that are unrelated to the battle plan. Instead, we have here our line drawn in green. Our front line engages the enemy, as shown by the green arrows. The enemy, of course, are the red blocks. 2 cavalry units, or a bunch of them separated, each half on one side and half on the other, or whatever you want to do, lay on each side. Once the units engage, the cavalry goes around the back and strikes the first unit, attacking it, crushing it, causing it to rout. Once this unit has been defeated, both the cavalry unit and the unit engaging it can now move on to attack the next unit down the line. And once the next unit is crushed, it continues to the next unit, and so on until the army crumbles. On the other side, the same thing happens. We just want you to focus on one side at a time. This means that as the line collapses from the outwards, it collapses from the outwards inwards until the enemy at the center is surrounded. At some point, the cavalry can be sent out to chase down the enemy. However, at first it is used as shock troops, and it causes a significant numerical advantage at the very edges of the battle line, thus crushing those units there with a high numerical quantitative advantage on those troops, a high local advantage. The last very important issue that we want to discuss on the basics of quality versus quantity is the quality of ranged troops. That is to say, troops that can shoot better at a distance or can shoot for a larger range. If you can shoot your enemy before they're in range and you shoot them before they can shoot back, you might be able to win the battle. During this time, you might even be able to hit critical units, the kind of units that can win wars, or without them, the enemy will be lost. Officer corps, intelligence corps, any kind of troops that are kind of vital for the enemy. If you can hit them before they're even able to fire back, well, you kind of won the battle before it has even started. In such a fight, the quality army that has a bigger range wants to keep the enemy at a distance. They want to keep them in the golden zone where they can fire at the enemy, but the enemy can't fire back. The enemy, the one with the lower quality range troops, are going to want to get through the golden zone very, very quickly, because that is the area where they're losing men and they're not going to kill anyone. And any kind of way that we can get through that zone quickly, we might want to approach that zone slowly. That is to say, as long as they can't fire at us, we can walk at 1 mile an hour. There's no rush. Once we can fire back, there's also no rush. Once we can fire back effectively, that is. However, as long as we are in the golden zone, we want to move quickly. We want to move out of that golden zone, either retreat or attack. However, we do not want to stay in the golden zone, where we are slaughtered and nothing is done in return. Here we have another video for you, this time about the golden zone. Now, the most classical kind of golden zone that was in antiquity, and maybe we can regenerate it in the modern age, are troops on the walls. That is troops that can shoot from the wall, thus having a height advantage, being able to shoot slightly better than the troops at the bottom. In this case, I've placed gunners on the walls, and here we see the range that they have when they go in. This entire area over here is the golden zone, where I can shoot at them, but they can't shoot back. In this case, they have spears, and the spears are going to need to advance through the golden zone, climb up the walls, and only then can they attack the gunners, in which case we're going to replace them with spearmen. In this side, we had a reverse situation with the golden zone. Here they have archers, very good archers, and therefore we replaced our troops way back here. What we're going to do is force them to climb the walls, and as they climb the walls, we're going to sneak forward to them. We want to eliminate their golden zone. That means that once they're up on top of the walls, their archery advantage is no longer in effect. What does that mean? That means that once we kind of trick them in order to destroy their golden zone time, in order to be able to attack them in melee combat very, very quickly, instead of them firing arrows at us for a long period of time. Here we have, now they're climbing up the walls, so we're going to send our troops running forward to face them. Here we're going to leave 2 units over here that are going to be very, very useful. We're going to move the troops around, and we're going to move maybe these guys over here. No, I think it's a bit too late for them. However, as you can see here, they have entered the golden zone, thus my troops have begun shooting at them. Already, 2 units are down 20% of their troops. They have not even reached the walls. This one already seems like it's going to rout very soon. On the other side, we have here the archers at the top. They've made it, but now they're too close. They're being stormed by the spears, and they're going to lose because they're not good melee combat units. We have essentially eliminated their golden zone, so now they can't fire from a distance. These troops over here are in danger, so we're going to drag them a bit back and replace them with different troops. These guys just stood there and waited in the golden zone. A very bad move. They lost half their troops before they decided to climb up the walls. A very stupid move. What can I say? The AI is not always the best. Over here we have troops that have began making it up to the top. Over here the unit has routed because it was destroyed in the golden zone. Over here we have troops, melee troops. Over here all the archers are routing because we destroyed them in the golden zone. Again, it's a key for this battle. We used a lot of ranged troops in order to make sure that we can destroy them before they are a danger, or when they aren't a danger because they're in the wrong zone. Now, the rest of the clip is not going to be very interesting. The reason that it's not going to be very interesting is that it's no longer a fair match. Over here we have some troops that are going to be defeated. It's going to take a bit of time to defeat them. Over here we have a local numerical advantage. Over here we started planting gunners back on the wall just to have a little fun with the people. They're just going to shoot at the remainders that are a fraction of what they were at the beginning of the battle. Over here we already have their general unit going in. That's never a good sign. That's a reserve unit they keep for, well, when things go badly. Over here we have them shooting down. This is really not an interesting battle anymore. If you like this video, please comment, upvote, and subscribe. If you want to help further, go and watch my other videos. And if you like them as well, do the same over there. Also, please share this video and any other video you might think people might take interest in. If you want to support me further, you can buy my book on Amazon, Ancapistan by Noah Goodman. Thank you for watching, and good night.